3, 2, 1. You're watching the UAP channel. This is a thought exercise based on research that's been done over the years on EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities. A lot of this research is old. It's a thought exercise trying to come to some conclusions on the topic. And it's arranged in a series of bullet points followed by a summary. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly. So let's just start. We're talking about extraterrestrials. We're talking about a generic extraterrestrial, what those demographics would be for that generic extraterrestrial. Now, let's get started. Again, some of this is based on research that's quite old, and some is based on current research, but you guys can check this out on your own and verify these facts. In my mind, they're facts, but again, this is the greatest science fiction project in the world, and let's take a look at it that way. All right, let's get started. The majority of EBs live below ground. They do not live on the surface of their planets. They live underground in tunnels and so forth. So that is a big difference between Earth dwellers who live on the surface and the majority of EBEs. They all live underground. The majority of planets are arid deserts where they live. They're not verdant like Earth. And by the way, the galaxy is supposed to be littered with planets that are burned out hulks from lack of taking care of the environment, such as global warming that we're facing right now. The planet populations that are populated by these EBEs there's no more than 100,000 of them on the planet. And let me just add to that the longer lifespans than humans. Some have been mentioned to have lifespans of a couple hundred years and so forth. This explains a couple things in my mind. One, why haven't they invaded Earth? Well, there aren't that many of them. They'd have to get together and, challenge the military might of the Earthlings. This also, I think, explains why there is such a cloning culture. Why are they cloning all the time, cloning each other, cloning grays? It's because they have smaller populations. And if you take this thought process a little further, you could say if they have longer lifespans, then their reproductive cycles are probably shorter too. If they have arid planets, they don't have the resources to support large populations and so forth. So this all seems to make sense. Let's just move on here. I'm going to try to keep this going. Now, they have different periodic charts than Earth. One aspect is if a supernova had blown up in the neighborhood of these planets while they were forming or before they were formed, that supernova is going to produce element 151, for example. And so the periodic chart and the basic chemistry is different depending on where they are and where they are from. They're entirely different than the Earth. And this enables their propulsion technology. Okay, now I want to get into this. Now this is, I believe, a book by Tom Armstrong, and this is an old publication. All the information on UAPs, we're recycling all of this. There is no national historic library for UFO information. And there are personal libraries. What we need, I think, is to establish one central depository. What was it, Cairo, that had the library with all the knowledge in it? So that we can look at this from a historic perspective. We don't really have that now. And we recycle so many ideas that were all sussed out in the past. Anyway, Tom Armstrong's book, he mentions that there is universal law in the universe. And it's regarding planetary sovereignty and free will. So, in other words, until a population of a planet can go interstellar, they're to be left alone. They have planetary sovereignty and free will. Now, this is what law-abiding EBs follow, and they are allowed to kind of influence things positively with frequencies and perhaps placing thoughts or notions in people's heads and so forth. But that's really all they're allowed to do. They're not allowed to contact the planet. They're not supposed to land on the planet, so forth. But not all EB races follow this universal law. If you take this a step further, intentional visitors to Earth are breaking this law. So they are, in fact, they're criminals based on this universal law. So we can start with that. Now, accidental visitors also exist. You know, we're kind of in the backwater of the Milky Way galaxy, and supposedly EBs do stumble upon us. These would be neutral EBs, okay? But the intentional visitors and the EBs that are working with humans, and the EBs that, you know, some say reptoids that live underground and so forth, these are all could be considered galactic criminals, okay? Based on Tom Armstrong's book and theories. So, we've got that. All right. So they may be helpful. You know, Linda Moulton Hall says, you know, the Greys work with us and they're very favorable, but they lie. I think this explains a lot of that. Now, let's just move forward. With these good EBs, there's an intergalactic trade system. They use barter, and they trade between races. There is a positive EB United Nations of sorts. And let me just break here for 1 second. The other thing that's a notion around EBs, and I may cover this later as well, but I just want to bring it up now. There is no diversity in these EB planetary populations. There are no races. They are all uniform beings. So that's another difference from Earth, okay? Moving forward. So there is a positive EB United Nations of sorts, and this has really worked out to do this trade. Now, intergalactic law is not like Earth, okay? It's the Wild West out there in the interstellar space and among various planets. Now, again, there is this EB United Nations, but not every EB strain belongs to this. So, intergalactic law is not like Earth. Slavery of various types exists. If you look at these 20 and back soldier stories, they're not paid and so forth. And this is, you know, once you're shanghaied into intergalactic space, there's not much you can do. So slavery of various levels and types does exist. There are chimeras, you know, and genetic experimentation. Again, this has to do with the lifespan and limited populations, I think, of these races. And the only way they can, you know, develop a worker class is to clone it. And, you know, certainly genetic material extraction from Earth is something that's going on. I believe that you could classify this as criminal activity under Tom Armstrong's view of things. Again, abductions of other races occur, and you could call these kidnappings. Okay, there is one theory that the Earth women are highly prized. intergalactically. Rogue privateer EB races exist. So there are races of EBs that just ignore all of these conventions. Okay, and they say the Greys, at least one race of Greys visiting Earth, is one of these races that totally ignore every one of these conventions. They do not abide by any of it. So, genetic extraction materials, cloning, abductions, and so forth. There's also planetary acquisition is a thing. They do this. They say that they so-called reptoid or reptilian race is behind this. And I just watched an interview with a 20-and-back soldier who said that they do this, a lot of this through false flags. They send in military Earthlings in many cases, and they, in this case, this 20-and-back soldier said, in order to get the moon base from the Nazis, a location on the moon, that they had to pledge 25,000 20-and-back soldiers, and these were used for these false flag operations, which prepped this planet for an alien invasion and acted like they were friends. They were actually there doing intelligence, and then mass casualty warfare would come in, and the reptilians would take over the planet. And this supposedly is all directed behind the curtain. The Great Oz is, as we'll go into later, artificial intelligence. There are hostile warrior EB races. These Trantaloids, or these insect race, is one that Linda Moulton Howe talks about. Also, your reptoids or reptilians are mentioned a lot. Earth space defense programs do exist. There's a massive secret grid protecting the Earth. They can keep out aliens. The aliens that are getting in, somebody's letting them in. And there supposedly are associations between some countries and some bad aliens that the countries are letting them in. But Solar Warden is a program that's talked about defending the solar system. Linda Moulton Hall says this is extensive. William Tompkins talks about this a great deal in his interviews as well, about how we have a large contingent of interstellar space battleships, essentially roaming the Milky Way and maybe intergalactically. I'm not sure. Now, another thing that comes up, and I've done a bit of research on this myself, there is a German or / Nazi space race. A German force exists. I was skeptical of this after doing a lot of research, World War II. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but if you follow the evidence and keep an open mind, this is highly likely, and it's brought up often. And these are not good guys, but our space program works with them, and they are out there, and they are aligned with, reptilians and so on and so forth. So there is a German contingent out there, actually a Nazi, that supposedly the Nazis established the first moon base back in the day, World War II era. And again, I'm going to do a separate video on this, but didn't believe it. Now I got an open mind about the whole Nazi UFO thing. Let's move forward here. Earth's space forces had early EB agreements. So we talk about Eisenhower here. Supposedly he said that he would be granted technology if we got rid of our nuclear weapons. Eisenhower said no. These were the Nordics supposedly contacted them first, and then the EBs came and said, well, we'll trade you technology. You don't have to give up your nukes, but we want to be able to sample genetic material, so that was allowed. And then the abduction, a certain number of abductions were allowed, and then the Greys totally violated all of these agreements. So those early EB agreements and other concessions were due to an imbalance of power. Eisenhower, for example, was presented with these anti-gravity craft and so forth. So they had to cut a deal any way they could, and these were not favorable to Earth. Some might see them as, crimes against the human species. They allowed illegal activity, and I think this is part of the reason for non-disclosure. These were, in retrospect, mistakes, but they were a compromise that seemed to have to be done. There's also been state criminal acts committed to maintain the secrecy of this EBE issue. And this is also a reason for non-disclosure. I'm doing a special series on the JFK assassination, I believe was related to exactly this issue. Forced stalls, so-called suicide, jumping out of a 14-story window, by the way, after he created MJ-12, and so forth. And through the years, I just saw a recent piece that said that these stopped around the mid-70s, or 78, I think. And I think that's after MK Ultra went into wide use. There is a piece I'm working on right now that indicates Bob Lazar may have had some MK Ultra programming to keep him from disclosing some stuff. But anyway, I'll go into that in another video. So there are crimes, blood has been spilled. This is another reason for non-disclosure. This is going to come out and someone's going to have to answer for this. And now MJ-12 documents that have been cleared, that have been cited as being real by Bob Wood, a forensic document specialist. I go through this in another one of my videos. You can check it out on the JFK assassination. Say disclosure will only take place if there is a coordinated large-scale hostile EB attack. Okay? That is the only reason MK-12 documents say there will be a disclosure, and this disclosure will be by law. So that's what the document states. So you can conclude from that this disclosure condition is legally defined on Earth, and also keeping it secret is legally defined. According to MJ-12 documents, we don't know, but this certainly, another source that I found in my research said that it's really not up to residents of planet Earth to decide when disclosure is going to take place. It's up to the aliens, the EBs, to decide when there's going to be disclosure. Moving forward, neutral, now this is again according to Tom Armstrong, neutral EBs visiting Earth intentionally or accidentally, okay, will not want to have anything to do with humans. So anybody that's good or neutral that belongs to the interstellar family, according to interstellar law, is not going to want to have anything to do with humans. Any contact they're going to have with humans is going to be accidental. So abductions and so forth, these are not neutral EVs. Positive EVs will follow universal law, which allows some subtle persuasion, or total non-interference until interstellar travel has been established by the planet. So, in other words, there's vibrational transmissions and these types of things. I mentioned this earlier. But this is all that universal law, according to Tom Armstrong, allows. So anybody doing anything more than that, I don't know. And if you look at it this way, subtle persuasion, perhaps Nikola Tesla said he was influenced by some ETs, so that might be an example of positive ET persuasion. Now, they say interstellar travel is what opens up a planet to the Galactic Council or the Galactic United Nations. Now, according to William Tompkins and others, Earth has achieved this goal, but there has been no disclosure. Secrecy is maintained, which implies that we have possible negative EB relations may be the foundation of this travel and may be the foundation of our intergalactic relations. So perhaps this EB United Nations is not recognizing this travel. They're seeing it as a illegal kind of association that's not kosher, doesn't meet the hurdle they have to reach to get disclosure. Just watched a video with Linda Moulton Howe, and she said that military interests and private industry, which is the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us about, has already divided up the asteroid belt for asteroid mining. I just watched an interview with Senator Warner's son. He said, there's stuff going on. There is asteroid mining going on. There's a base on Mars. There's a base on the moon, and so forth. And his father told him when he asked him about MJ-12, do not go there. Do not discuss that topic. So that's that's on Gaia. You can look for that. He's got a new book out. Very interesting interview. So, in other words, we started out with the bad guys. We've developed this entire space program. Space with these bad guys, these Germans. We've tolerated these slavery and these crimes against humanity and so forth. So our space, private, military-industrial complex space efforts may be bent, as the Brits say, okay? So this could also be a reason why there is not disclosure. So let's just move it. So EBs in direct contact with humans are either rogue privateers, advancing self-interest. This could be the Greys working that lie, that are positive but lie. They could be negative EBs who are just putting up a front. These could be the abductors and so forth, those collecting genetic material, potentially, or people in direct contact could be accidental tourists that have wandered on to this planet in this galaxy. But according to Tom Armstrong, there's not a lot of leeway here. Either they're accidental or not kosher, not positive. So, anyway, if we move forward from this reinforces the non-disclosure narrative. There could be a secret cabal of military-industrial complex collaborating with these questionable EBs for personal gain. And that's a summary of everything I've just said. So, we have a questionable military-industrial complex here. Another possibility is that contact is from a non-biological life form, specifically artificial intelligence. So this is something that can't be overlooked as well. Carrie Cassidy is way out on the fringe of UFO research, but she has been talking about the threat from intergalactic artificial intelligence for a long time, and Elon Musk is now talking about it. I think I mentioned that later. So let's just move forward. I think this is something, self-replicating artificial intelligence. And anyway, this machine-based intergalactic race may be using cloned artificial EBs. So these are the android grays. Again, to interact with Earth, remaining behind the curtain like the mighty Oz. So all of our contacts may be the result of cloned androids sent here by artificial intelligence. That's in our AI, intergalactic and interdimensional AI. That's a possibility. It's a real science fiction narrative there. There are theories that state hostile interdimensional AI races exist and communicate via unbreakable encoded communications across the universe and across dimensions. So, in other words, AI is propagated and is a force throughout the universe. This is a mind-expanding thought, but again, perhaps the AI future Elon Musk and others fear. So, that's another way to look at it. I think that's the end of my presentation, but I think this is a pretty interesting look at what one concept of the EB could be. And again, this is some of the best science fiction in existence. I think there's, based on the research, quite a number of races. But I think the AI being behind a front of clones, android clones, is an interesting concept. But in any case, this Tom Armstrong book was written years ago. And as he says, anybody that's visiting here is either accidental or not good, not positive. So there's some questions here. There's all kind of stuff you can look up on this, but I thought this was an interesting video to do, a thought exercise, some of the best science fiction going, and based on a lot of research over the years. This is the UAP channel. I hope you liked the video. Send us your sightings.